So I did Barbenheimer, which obviously Barbenheimer has been one of the biggest cinematic events we have seen post-COVID, and going into the year, I really didn't see that coming. Even at the very early months of the year, before Barbenheimer, Barbie really became a thing, I didn't anticipate that these two films were going to be like the biggest deals of the year cinematically. I was looking at other films such as like Top Gun Maverick and the Mario movie. Why did I say Top Gun? Mission Impossible 7. I mean, not Top Gun. I was looking at those sorts of films as being the biggest and most talked about of the year, and while Mario did do incredibly well, Barbenheimer has just taken the world a storm. So even though I wasn't able to watch Barbie and Oppenheimer on the same day, just due to life and work, I thought in the spirit of Barbenheimer, let's combine the two films and do my review for these two together in one video, in the order that I watched them in. But I would like to say that what I was really impressed with about both of these films, and not even the films themselves, is the fact that this is the busiest I have seen the cinema post-COVID. It's just incredible. I remember being there on the Saturday night watching Oppenheimer, and the foyer was just filled to the brim with people. People queuing up to, the concession stands to get drinks and snacks, and the actual queue just to get your ticket stamped to walk into the screens. I've never seen it. I don't think I've ever seen my cinema that busy. Like even, pre-COVID for like, a Marvel movie or a Star Wars movie. I don't think I'd ever seen the cinema that busy before, which was really insane. But it was lovely to see, and it really shows that people will come out to the cinema to go see a film if it captures their attention. And like I say, as I said before, I didn't necessarily think that was going to be Barbenheimer, but here we are. But let's jump into the review, and I'm going to review them in the order that I watched them, starting off with Barbie. So yeah, on the Friday evening after work, I went to watch Barbie, and I was really excited about it. Like Greta Gerwig, she's a director who just hasn't missed yet. This is her third, it's her fourth directorial effort, but this is kind of like her third one in the mainstream, and she really hasn't missed at this point. Lady Bird was a great coming-of-age movie, and Little Women, while maybe not for me, like I don't particularly love Little Women, but it was a good film. Barbie is just a real step up for Greta Gerwig, just in terms of like the level of production that's in this film and the size and scale of it. She hasn't done anything quite to this size yet, and she handles it like an absolute champ. Margot Robbie is just born to play this role. I mean, when she was announced that, she was going to be cast as Barbie, everybody instantly was just like, well, yeah, that makes sense. And, but let's not take away from the fact that Margot Robbie is a phenomenal actress. She is. Like, in everything she's in, she does a fantastic job. And in this movie, that is no different. Not only is she able to deliver the kind of stereotypical Barbie things, as she is stereotypical Barbie in this movie, she delivers that incredibly well, but there is also this deeper level to the character that gets unraveled throughout the film, where Margot Robbie is asked to do some really challenging things, and she pulls them off so well that she just delivers throughout the entirety of the film. She's really tremendous throughout. And like I say, she may be a kind of, at first, on the surface, obvious casting choice, but I think that thought process kind of disappears once you see the film because of what she does within it. I would also like to quickly mention America Ferrera is also in this movie, and she is also really good. I didn't expect her to have such a big role in the film. I also didn't expect her role to be so standout. She's really great in this, as is the rest of the supporting cast. Like, there's some really fun roles, like Simu Liu is really fun in the film. It's nice to have Ncuti Gatwa in there. There's just some really great casting choices throughout, and even like Will Ferrell is in this movie. And typically, like, I'm a bit hit or miss with Will Ferrell. Like, there are some of his roles that I really enjoy and find really funny, but then there are others that I just find him a bit annoying, and he's kind of doing the same shtick. But I think he really worked here. It is a very similar character, as a lot of people have mentioned, to what he played in the Lego movie, but it's really good what he delivers here, and I really enjoyed it. But of course, the standout of the film, as everyone is talking about, is of course Ryan Gosling as Ken, who he steals the movie. He really does. And it's unfortunate to say that, given the fact that this is, Barbie, and the fact that Barbie herself doesn't necessarily steal the film in the same way. But Gosling was just born for this, man. Absolutely born. He revels in this. And you can see, when he's in the run-up to this film coming out, the behind-the-scenes, the interviews, he starts talking about, the Kenergy and all that stuff. And that's all brilliant. Like, that's hilarious. I've personally have found that all very entertaining. And the fact that this movie plays up on it, you get the There are phrases like that throughout the film that you don't, and there's even things in the background you'll notice, which is really funny. But Ryan Gosling's performance is like, I often forget how funny Ryan Gosling is. If you've seen films like The Nice Guys or particularly Crazy Stupid Love, he is so funny, so funny. And in this movie, he delivers that like through and through. He's just really entertaining presence throughout. He rides the line really finely, because Ken could have gone one or two ways in this movie, where he could have been just really dumb, or could have been just really alpha male. But this movie realizes those kind of two sides and just rides straight down the middle. And it's really impressive, because I feel like that's a really hard line to walk, but Ryan Gosling does it. And does it with such a straight face. It's incredible. And obviously, like, the outfits that he wears, the blonde highlights, it's an incredible performance. And props to the makeup and costume design on the character as well, for really just amping that all up. But people aren't lying when Ryan Gosling steals this movie, because he really does. And will he get Oscar attention for this? Quite possibly. I think there is certainly a Best Supporting Actor nomination coming his way for this movie. He might not necessarily win, but damn, like, it's a really strong performance, and also just a really funny and memorable one. And as mentioned at the beginning, this is Greta Gerwig's newest film, and this was such a step up for her direction-wise. There was so much going on in this film, such a big scale that had to be dealt with, and she just really delivers on that. There's so many kind of big sequences and big chase scenes and things like that, while also feeling kind of small and self-contained at the same time. But yeah, Greta Gerwig, like, this was such a big step up for her, and you wouldn't even know it. Like, she just handles it like she's been doing it for years. But she also wrote this movie, or co-wrote it with her partner Noah Baumbach, who of course is a director himself. And the script is just great. Like I said, it's really clever, it's witty, it's funny, and when you have actors, like really capable actors, helping to deliver that dialogue, it just really pops on screen. And I think that them two as a team, they worked together before, but not quite to this degree. I kind of hope they work together again on something in a similar vein, not like Barbie 2 or a movie exactly the same as this, but something that kind of is in a similar vein, just so that they can deliver something just as poppy and as funny and as memorable as this, because there are so many lines from this film that just stick with me, and that's just because of how memorable and well written they were. Special shout out to the production and costume design of the film as well. Like, without them, this movie wouldn't really be what it is. Mainly because, the design of like Barbie Land itself is unlike anything you've seen on screen before. It's kind of surreal. It's this place that obviously is it's this place that doesn't make sense. Like, there's this particular thing in the film where there is a way you can travel from Barbie Land to the real world, and there is no real explanation as to how it works, but I don't think it needs to be. It's just this really silly way that it happens, but it actually has some really nice production design moments throughout it, and the cinematography is really good. But the design of Barbie Land itself is just absolutely fantastic, and the costumes as well. Like I say, all the Barbies and all the Kens have all their own costumes, and when you look at like the Barbie toy line, a big part of it is obviously costumes, changing the clothes, changing the costumes, and this film realizes that and really nails down on it, and it's fantastic all the way through. There is not a single bad piece of production design or costume design throughout the film. I'll also shout out the soundtrack, which is absolutely slapping. I've been listening to that non-stop since it came out. In particular standouts, like I really like Dua Lipa's song that's in the beginning of the film. There's like a dance sequence to that, mainly because I think like not only is the song really poppy, but also the dance that goes with it is really entertaining. Like, as someone who comes from a dancing background, I really appreciate when there's like a fun dance sequence in a film, and I really enjoyed that. Particularly like Ryan Gosling and Simu Liu as well, in particular, who I didn't really know Simu Liu could dance, but he can, and he can do it really well. And that whole sequence was really fun for me as well. And of course, I've already spoken about Ryan Gosling, but I'm Just Ken, like that song is just like such a highlight, really entertaining to listen to. It's got really great lyrics, but also the way it's performed with such like determination, that it just sells it so hard. And this film also has the perfect runtime. Like, this film is just under 2 hours, and that is perfect. There are so many movies that are just trying to be these big, long epics because there are, you know, like Avengers Endgame and Avatar, you know, these films were that length and made that much money, but not every film needs to be that. And I think Barbie understood that, and it being under 2 hours, it was just perfect. So overall, I really don't have much to complain about when it comes to Barbie. I thought it was just a really entertaining film, really enjoyable, with great performances, fantastic production design, amazing writing and direction. I just thought that this was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was everything I hoped it was going to be, and it's definitely going to be in my top 10 by the end of the year. I'm pretty sure about that. So with that said, I'm going to give Barbie a 5 out of 5. That's what I gave it on Letterboxd, and that's what I'm going to stick with because it's just great. Now, moving on to the other side of the coin, we of course have Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, like I say, I saw Oppenheimer the very next day on the Saturday evening, which was when I just saw the cinema being as packed as it was. Obviously, I mean, a Saturday night, it's going to be busier than it is during the week, but I had never seen it like that. You know, I'd seen it busy for things like, you know, big Marvel movies in the past and Star Wars movies and stuff. Like I remember like The Last Jedi being particularly busy. But I have never seen it like this. Never seen it like this. And I've even spoken to like a couple of the guys who work at my cinema, and you know, they were saying that they've never experienced anything like this. Even in terms of like, you know, money intake for the business, they've never seen anything like this. And that's really telling. But Oppenheimer, you know, the fact that obviously it's such a different film to Barbie, and that's obviously what made the contrast so hilarious, but it's equally as good. Oppenheimer, of course, being the new film from Christopher Nolan, which is a director I am a huge fan of. Nolan probably being my second favourite director of all time, just behind Denis Villeneuve. I love Nolan. Huge Nolan fan. And I'm also a huge fan of historical biopics. So when I found out that Nolan, like his next film following Tenet, was going to be a historical biopic about Robert J. Oppenheimer, like, what an exciting concept that is. And the thing is, Nolan is so experimental sometimes, and he does these really interesting and intricate things with his filmmaking, you know, his whole gimmick to do with time. All that was running through my head was, how is he going to use that in this film? Because obviously, if it's a historical biopic, there's not really much you can do within that. Like, there's not much movement throughout that. But he does do some really interesting stuff in the film with that, kind of similarly in vein to what he did with Dunkirk, but also very different to Dunkirk at the same time. So as a Nolan fan, you know, I was really satisfied with his latest entry. So let's talk about the man himself, Cillian Murphy, who of course plays Oppenheimer in this film. What an absolutely blindsidingly good performance this is. Easily going to be nominated for an Oscar here. Might even win. Cillian Murphy, I think, has been one of those actors who's kind of been in the background of Hollywood for a long time. You know, he's a Nolan regular. He's been in most of Nolan's films, but he's never been a lead in a Nolan film before until now. And I think that it's kind of perfect timing for him to kind of wait for Nolan to give him this role, which he was just kind of born to play. He just nails it. Like, he nails the kind of reclusive, but also kind of outgoing mixture of personality that Oppenheimer was. And he just nails every aspect of that, but also at the same time, when you get to like the back half of the film and you see his kind of inner turmoil and his inner trauma about everything that happened, that's just incredible stuff to see on screen. Absolutely incredible. Like, shook me to my core levels of incredible. And you know, I don't want to go too much into spoilers, but there is a particular scene later on in the film where you really get a look into like his soul and how he's feeling about what's happened. And you know, when I say that, obviously I'm talking about this is post the bombs being dropped, because I mean, obviously that's not a spoiler. But after those bombs are dropped, you see inside of his soul, like you see what he's, you know, the kind of trauma and the turmoil inside of himself that he's dealing with and juggling. And it's just incredible. Like, I've never seen an actor do that before. Like, incredible eye acting. And yeah, Cillian Murphy, just absolutely wow. Just wow. And there are other performances in the film as well that really stand out. Like, Emily Blunt isn't in the movie very much, but when she is there, she's great, and she has a particular scene that is absolutely amazing. Florence Pugh, again, not in the movie that much, but she's really good when she's there. Matt Damon, really great throughout. But it's kind of these other performances throughout the film that you notice that stand out. Like, for me, like Josh Hartnett, who I've not seen in a while, like, was really good in this. Obviously, you've got Josh Peck in the movie, which is just fantastic. You got Roderick in there, and I don't really remember him saying anything outside of like one line, but it's great that he's there. And Jack Quaid from The Boys, also not really in the movie very much, but he's good when he's there. But I think the main other performance you've got to talk about in this movie is Robert Downey Jr., who is... I didn't expect him to be in the movie as much as he was. Based on the trailers, I kind of expected Robert Downey Jr. to be in the film, particularly only in those like conference scenes, but it's not that at all. Like, this is almost a two-hander between Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr., which the trailers would not have you believe. But Robert Downey's phenomenal in this. Amazing. Obviously he hasn't really done much since the MCU. He kind of joined the MCU, he was Iron Man, and then he didn't really do much else other than Iron Man. And since Endgame, we haven't really seen him. But him kind of making a triumphant return to cinema in a Nolan film, playing such a integral, incredible role, it's admirable. And I think that this performance, again, like Cillian Murphy and like Ryan Gosling as well, Oscar-worthy. Genuinely Oscar-worthy. I think we'll see some really... I think we will see some award chat for Robert Downey Jr., and I think he absolutely deserves it. He's kind of a legacy actor at this point. He's been around for a long time, and this may be his time. But the elephant in the room about this movie is, of course, the explosion itself. Which, when you watch it, like I watched this movie in IMAX, which I feel like you have to watch this film in IMAX. That's the way it was intended. Unless you can watch the film in 70mm, which obviously is very, very difficult to find, but if you can, that's supposedly the intended way. But either way, the explosion in this film is really, really well done, because obviously it's done somewhat practically, which it's weird, because it's one of them where like the explosion is there and it happens in the film and it's very impressive, but it's not what you remember about the film, is what I'll say. It's very impressive to watch, and particularly the sound design of that scene is particularly impressive. Especially, when the bomb kind of drops, you kind of see the explosion go off, and it's just silent. The film goes silent, and the entire room was silent, which was really impressive. And then the actual explosion happens, and then you just feel it. And as impressive as that is, I feel like that's not what the film was really there for. Like, the film shows it, but it's more, like I say, the performances that you remember and the moments of trauma that you remember, rather than the actual explosion itself. But that being said, the explosion itself is really, really impressive. It's really well done. The visual effects are great. Like I say, it's done kind of semi-practically, so that's also really, really good. And the sound design as well is kind of, it'll really hit you on the inside. Which is really impressive as well. And that explosion scene leads me on to my next point, which is the cinematography. Because the cinematography in that scene is phenomenal, but the cinematography throughout the entire film is fantastic. Once again, Chris Nolan reteams with Hoyte van Hoytema, who delivers yet another beautiful looking film for Nolan. It's just gorgeous to look at, across its entire runtime, and it's 3 hours long, so you get a lot of beautiful shots in the film. There's one in particular that really stands out to me, which was a shot of Oppenheimer on a horse in the rain, and it just looked amazing. And it kind of got me excited, because for some reason, like, I was watching the film and I thought, God, Nolan would make a good Western. Like, we don't know what Nolan's doing next after this movie. He hasn't said what he's doing next. He's actually publicly said he's not doing anything while the strikes are going on, which I think is, very admirable. But when watching the film, I was like, damn, like, Nolan hasn't done a Western, and I would love to see that. But yeah, I think Hoyte van Hoytema, he's one of the best cinematographers we have. Like, him and Roger Deakins are the best we have in the business right now, and he delivers yet another beautiful, gorgeous looking film for Nolan here. And Nolan also reteams with Ludwig Göransson here, who of course did the score for Tenet as well. And this score is just fantastic. I think the main problem with the score, though, is the fact that, similarly to Tenet, Ludwig Göransson's score kind of plays continually throughout the film. Like, there isn't really many points where the score ends or breaks. So you're kind of constantly hearing music, so it's hard for particular scores or particular moments of the score to stand out. There are a couple of standout pieces, of course. Like I say, the scene I mentioned earlier about where you see Oppenheimer's trauma. That scene in particular has amazing music, and there are a couple others as well. But yeah, it's a fantastic score. I just wish that perhaps, I don't know if it was Nolan or if it was Göransson, but I wish they kind of had a little bit more restraint on it, just so it allowed for actual bits of music to sit with you and simmer a little bit more, rather than just continually playing again and again and again, like just to the next bit, to the next bit, to the next bit, because it kind of becomes like like I say, a bit kind of, not deafening, but you kind of become almost a bit numb to it because it's just always there. Kind of like white noise in a sense. Which sounds really harsh because the score's great, but it's just, I think you know what I mean. So yeah, the score's great, but I just wish they could have maybe held back on it a little bit. And I will quickly mention the runtime as well. This movie is 3 hours long, but I think this is one of the cases where 3 hours does work, you know? There are, I think, a couple of scenes that you could have trimmed down or you could have cut where you could have brought the runtime down a little bit, but I think most of the film feels pretty essential, and I think that ultimately, you know, when you get to the end of the film, it all comes together in a beautiful way. I think the 3 hours really comes into, like what I mentioned at the beginning, where Nolan has, of course, his obsession with time, and I think that's kind of where the film really gets that 3 hour runtime from, because Nolan is playing with time throughout the film. But by the time you get to the end of that 3 hour runtime, it does blend together in a really nice way. So I think that 3 hours, it is a long movie, and I think by the end of it, like, you do feel like you've been there a while, but at no point was I waiting for the film to end. At no point was I bored. I was completely entranced the entire way through, and I walked out of the film at the very end, because the end scene is particularly traumatic, just feeling absolutely knocked out. But not knocked out in the sense that I'm bored, knocked out in the sense of, bloody hell, that was insane. And one final note, I will mention the sound mixing in this movie, because I was really, really worried going into this, especially going into the IMAX showing, that the sound mixing was going to be atrocious, mainly because I watched Tenet in IMAX and it was absolutely god-awful, so much so that I think it made me dislike Tenet more than maybe I actually did. I still haven't actually watched Tenet since cinemas, so that's, you know, over 3 years ago, but I was really worried going into this that this film was going to be too much in terms of the sound mixing, and it was going to be horrible, just like Tenet was, but it actually isn't. Nolan has learned from Tenet, and I think that this film is way better, like, especially because this film is so talky. Like, this film is a lot of dialogue. It's mostly dialogue. You need the sound mixing to be clear so you can actually hear what people are saying. But thankfully, this movie does do that. It's still not, like, absolutely perfect. Like, I think there are still certain moments I didn't quite get, and I think, you know, on a rewatch, I would have to listen out a little bit more within certain scenes. You know, particularly maybe if we had some subtitles, that'd be nice. But it's a lot better than Tenet. And if you were worried about it, which I know a lot of people were, don't be. It's much better here than it was in Tenet. I wouldn't worry about it. So on the whole, Oppenheimer, a fantastic new addition to Nolan's filmography. I loved the film. It's incredibly, incredibly memorable. Again, I walked out of it feeling really shaken to my core, you know, just absolutely bewildered by it. It's got amazing performances. It's a gorgeous looking film. It's a real kind of cinematic experience type of a movie, and also a movie that will really sit with you and make you think. I think this film talks about a lot of interesting issues that, you know, are things that I didn't even really know about, and it kind of answered questions I didn't know I had about the atomic bomb and kind of the strategy and war tactics behind it. There's a lot. Like, it's a dense movie. There's a lot to chew on, and there's a lot to delve into, and I think that this is certainly one of Nolan's best films. I think that's fairly easy for me to say. I think this is one of Nolan's best films. I'm really excited to watch it again at some point, just so I can really delve into it even more. But it's a fantastic experience, and I'd highly recommend it. So with that said, I'm going to give Oppenheimer a 5 out of 5 as well, just like I did with Barbie, and again, that's what I gave it on Letterboxd, so I'm going to stick with that. I don't really have any complaints. Like I say, apart from maybe the sound mixing being a little bit here and there, and again, the score being a little bit dragged out, but beyond that, like, they're very minor complaints for me. I think that this film, like, the impression it left on me speaks volumes, and I think that it's very deserving of its 5 out of 5. So that was Barbenheimer. If you guys did Barbenheimer as well, please let me know in the comments what you thought of both of these films. You know, it seems like the opinions on these two films are quite varied, so I'm very interested to see what you guys think in the comment section down below. Please let me know your thoughts on these two films. And while, like I said, I gave them both 5 stars, I loved both of them. If I did have a preference, I think I would probably put Oppenheimer slightly above Barbie, just slightly. But then again, I also would maybe say Barbie is the more rewatchable of the two films. So it's kind of, it's very much like, I feel very similarly about them despite how different they are. But again, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Please tell me what you think of Barbenheimer. And as always, if you want to see more videos just like this, more reviews and more movie content, please subscribe and push that like button if you want to see more, and I hope to see you guys again next time.